Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. Happy holiday weekend. We're going to talk baseball today, right, Dargan? No, there was bigger news than Rick Keller's team going into the Saturday portion of the Big Ten tournament, which obviously is going very well. That's where Dargan Southard is. But Dargan this morning broke that Gary Barta, 17-year athletic director at the University of Iowa, retiring. I'm sure everyone watching this YouTube already knows that. His effective end date will be August 1st. Obviously, this is a major piece of news for the entire athletics program in all the major sports: football, basketball, wrestling, women's basketball, everything else. The future of those programs is now going to be in the hands of someone else. It's kind of interesting, Dargan, that as I was writing some of the stories overnight, and finishing the majority of them around 2:30 in the morning, come to the realization, which we should know, Barta never hired a football coach, a women's basketball coach, or a wrestling coach in 17 years. So I guess that speaks. There's a lot of flaws in his resume, of course, and we'll get to some of those. But Dargan, 17 years. It was really a legacy sort of stability, lawsuits, of course, but also just these coaches, and including himself, have just been in the same place for so long.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of good in the Gary Barta era. As you mentioned, on the field is kind of seems to be how most athletic directors get defined, and based on the coaches that they hire. And for the most part, those were good situations. And as you said, there was a lot of success on the field, but just kind of gauging the temperature of the Iowa fan base, there seems to be a lot of celebrations, a lot of happiness, a lot of it's about time. And so, I think the word that you put in your headline on your column was perfect and complicated as far as how his time at Iowa is going to be remembered, because there was a lot of turbulence, in the last probably 7-8 years, I feel like. So, I think all the, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to give credit for the excitement necessarily, but the frustration, I guess, a lot of it is justified in how things have been operated under, Barta's tenure. And, I think, as you touched on it, it's a really intriguing time now all of a sudden at Iowa, because, this was a program that for so long was known for stability. And then, sometimes that stability blended into complacency. And now, everything is kind of going to get a refresh, or has a chance to get a refresh, and really kind of see what Iowa looks like, with maybe a more modernized angle on it. So I think it's a really exciting time, to see what direction this goes after kind of being the same for a lot of years on the bigger fronts.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I mean, I just as you talk, like my mind ranges from all the good and all the bad, the bad for Gary Barta. And that's really, what his whole legacy was. I mean, you think, let's start a little bit with some of the positives. You cannot deny the fact that he brought in $650 million of private fundraising for the athletics department in his time. He was known as a tireless and very successful fundraiser. He got a lot of projects done outside of the TV money and whatnot. I mean, raising $55 million for the Iowa Football Performance Center, raising $90 million to redo the north end zone. I can't remember if you included this in your timeline, but hey, he even painted the Tiger Hawk on the water tower. So give the guy a little bit of credit here. He did some popular things. And whether I know there's, Ferentz fatigue and it's built up over time. And sure, you could argue that Kirk Ferentz at times might have been overpaid for 7 and 8 win seasons. But I would say over the long term, the Kirk Ferentz value of that contract and retaining him has outweighed, again, it's money that mostly is coming from, TV revenue, he's the Moon family head football coach now. That he got a family that owns the truck stop to basically endow the football coach position because he's a good fundraiser. So there's a lot to be said for the stability he's created, and I think you and I both wrote about it. A great example is the women's basketball program. I mean, not that he was going to go away from Lisa Bluter as an example, but like he stuck with it, and he stuck with Kirk Ferentz through down times, and then then the Rose Bowl, then even stuck with him through the racial bias stuff in 2020. Some arguably easily could have gotten rid of him during that time, but stuck with him. And I would say the football program as a whole, in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of success on the field, recruiting, is in a pretty good place, other than, we can talk about the offense later. And of course, Barta's fingerprints are in that too, with the Brian Ferentz contract. So it's just like so all over the map, even just in the Ferentz family. He's like, kind of bungled the Brian stuff a little bit, but also like been pretty good on the Kirk stuff. And then, as I pointed out in my column, I felt like he did not act strongly enough in a couple cases involving what was clearly going on in Chris Doyle's weight room between the Rabdo incident in 2011. Now, should Doyle have been fired then? That's neither here nor there, but there wasn't much of a strong response. And Kirk Ferentz names Chris Doyle assistant coach of the year 3 months later, and that's just kind of let go. That's sort of like, Doyle just, growing his power. And then 2018 diversity report comes along with really damning documentation from Black student athletes, including in football. James Daniels goes to Gary Barta, complaining about this stuff, and really nothing is done other than Kirk Ferentz allowing earrings and hoodies, in the facility. And, it's like, okay, well, we took care of that. So, and then that leads to the 2020 June stuff, which leads to a lawsuit, which leads to state legislators saying, Gary Barta needs to go because we're tired of getting sued, and that's a valid argument. So I don't know. I just kind of rambled a lot there, but it's just like with Gary Barta, there's so much. College football playoff chair, retiring Luka Garza's jerseys, Megan Gustafson's jerseys. I mean, there's, the controversy around Roy Marble's jersey retirement, the controversy around Dolphin Fran. I mean, he's handled so much in his time here. And I know you haven't covered it all directly, but you've been here the last several years and witnessed all this. So I don't know. What do you make of kind of everything I just said there and just everything you put together in your timeline?
Yeah, I will say, just to tie everything, make everything relevant here, you're talking about coaching hires. Probably his best coaching hire is the one that is going to play on the field in front of me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Another program that, had nothing going until Rick Keller got here. And, I know I saw some people saying that earlier in the week when Iowa, kind of solidified its regional berth, that they had to begrudgingly give credit to Barta for that hire because that was certainly one of his better ones. But yeah, I mean, I will say it's a tad weird not being able to judge the AD tenure entirely on the success of his football coach hire, because, and maybe that's just my Tennessee roots that ran through football coaches left and right. It always kind of seemed like when you analyze the AD, you started with, okay, well, how did his football coach do? And, again, there was definitely some times where they could have pulled the trigger on moving on from Ferentz. And to the most part, I agree that those decisions paid off, that, sticking with Kirk and sticking with this program through a lot of turbulence, largely kept Iowa in the same place. And, I think that's certainly part of the intrigue here is, for all intents and purposes, whomever takes this job is going to have to, in all likelihood, hire Kirk Ferentz's replacement. And so that really, fully turns the page into a fresh look And really will be interesting to see what direction Iowa goes, because, it's kind of been Barta and Kirk at the top of the food chain for a long time. And to have, one of those gone, and, Kirk's not going to coach forever. So, whenever that decision comes, it's probably sooner than later, whenever it is. And so it will be interesting to see if there's kind of a overcorrection, or it's like when you fire the offensive struggling coach, what do you go do? You get the guy who puts up 50 points a game. In reverse, if your defense struggles, you go and get the best defensive minded coach. So it'll be interesting to see if those two positions at the top, how different that looks than what kind of the face of everything was for so long. Because obviously football, the success of football kind of runs the show all across the board. And for that standpoint, I think you got to give the Iowa setup some credit, and a decent amount of credit for the stability of the last 15 years, 17 years under Gary.
Yeah, from people I talked to, in the last, whatever it's been since I kind of got word that this was going to happen about 15 hours ago, maybe. It came as a surprise to a lot of people, even very high level people within the coaching staffs, even communications people. I think it seemed like it was out of the blue now to give Gary his full statement. I mean, he said this was something he thought about over time. I think there's some speculation, and validly so, out there that, was he pushed out a little bit, and maybe he felt pushed out in some way, shape, or form. Notably, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers remember this, but when I reached out to Barbara Wilson's office to discuss the Gary Barta's position as athletic director after the football discrimination settlement payout at $4.2 million, Barta's fourth discrimination suit settlement of $11.2 million total since 2016. They were not interested in talking about that. And so her comments today were pretty brief. It certainly was complimentary of Gary's tenure, and didn't say anything negative about him, but her comment was notably brief, is what I would say. It was less than a paragraph about the retirement of a 17-year athletic director. So, I don't know. I think it's a good time. Gary is a very personable guy, very friendly guy, good guy, did a lot of good things, but it just was time overall for this, and overdue in some senses, some would say, and then there's no disputing that, but it was time for a change. I think it's good. His contract was going to run out at the end of June 2024. It hadn't been renewed, anything like that, extended, whatever. So there would have been ongoing questions, to bring up an old phrase, ongoing tensions that he talked about with Fran and Dolph, which was just another kind of like a little bit of a bungled messaging. I mean, trying to do the right thing, but just like, mentioning ongoing tensions between Fran and Dolph. Like, you don't need to do that. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot. Was he forced out? Was he not? He says he's been thinking about it for a while. 100% his decision. I pretty much think that Barta was. I think he was I mean, he's been through a lot, and I think he leaves at the athletics themselves. I think he leaves in a good spot. In my opinion. I mean, he's gotten track, baseball. I mean, women's basketball has never been better. Wrestling, he's got the facility going at least. Even though they're not beating Penn State. Football, is a solid place, and like you said, that's where you get judged. Men's basketball, that'll be interesting. Fran is kind of an acquired taste. Obviously, Barta hired him, but the new athletic director will not have hired Gary Barta, and it will either be Beth Getz or somebody from the outside. She's a year into this. So to me, men's basketball becomes kind of a real interesting thing as well. What is the long-term tolerance for Fran, whoever this is? And like you said, football coach will be hired by this next person.
Yeah, I like what you said about how, it felt like a good time because, I obviously have, I've been here since 2016. So that's kind of my range of looking at things. And it just felt like as the years went by recently, the negative noise surrounding him being in charge of Iowa athletics continued to grow and grow and overshadow, the good stuff that we've talked about. So, it might be a thing, depending on how this next, who gets hired as the AD and who that person hires as the football coach. It's possible that Gary Barta's tenure gains appreciation more over the course of time, whereas right now, it's pretty unanimously celebrated. I remember kind of a tangent here, but when Tennessee fired Philip Fulmer in 2008, everybody was excited. But then after the next decade of futility, everybody was like, Phil Fulmer wasn't too bad. So could something like that happen with Gary Barta's tenure? I could see that, but again, that probably means that Iowa takes a dip, and obviously Iowa fans don't want that. But one thing that I do want to point out, is the number of times that a decision was made with Gary at the forefront, and then the university had to issue an amendment to whatever that decision was. So two that come to mind are cutting women's. When he cut the sports during the COVID, and then 6 months later had to reinstate women's swimming because the negative noise was so loud with that decision. And then the other one recently was the decision to with the racial discrimination lawsuit to have taxpayer funds pay that. They initially released that and kind of stood by that, and then the negative noise was so loud that they had to come back and say, yeah, okay, we'll just take the money. So there were definitely, I think that was definitely not a, if you think of noteworthy Gary Barta qualities, PR department probably isn't at the top of the list. And there certainly are plenty more examples over the course of time. But yeah, it's just kind of talking through it like this. It's a very fascinating mix of high-profile positivity and high-profile negativity. And, I think time will really dictate what exactly is kind of the final, perception of the whole time.
Well, I think a lot of people are already talking about potential replacements. We did gather some 3-word headlines. Started to sift through those. Have yet to see a positive one. So we'll see. Maybe we can find one in the next 10 minutes or so. But Beth Getz definitely, for me, goes to the very top of the list. She's been here 1 year, but a lot of things stand out about her. Former Ball State athletic director for 4 years, was very accomplished there, and that's in the MAC, obviously. But comes to Iowa to take the deputy athletics director and COO job in September of 2022. That's very notable. It's not super common to take a step down, so to speak, when you're moving as an athletic director. I mean, she was in a position of strength. Ball State had won 7 or 9 conference championships in 2021-22. So she had things rolling there. She has been the interim AD at Minnesota, where the what's the guy's name? Norwood Teague, I believe, was the guy's name. Had the sexual harassment stuff going on there back in 2015. She took over. She was deputy there, steadied the ship. Ultimately, did not get the job. Minnesota hired Mark Coyle from Syracuse, and so she went to UConn. And one endorsement that I found out there was Brad Stevens, former Boston Celtics coach, now high front office president, I believe, with the Celtics. Are still playing basketball as far as I know. Called her a rock star when they were at Butler together. She was the associate AD at Butler when Brad Stevens was there. So she comes very, very highly acclaimed. Now, that said, I know, I've got some lists of names that I'm not comfortable publicizing really any of them, but without vetting it a little bit more. But, there are going to be Power 5 and Group of 5 sitting athletic directors interested in this job. And, I would not be surprised if, I'm almost certain Tulane's Troy Dannon, who was a former UNI athletic director, will throw his name in the hat. I mean, Iowa is a super intriguing job for any athletic director. I mean, because of the fact that you're going to get to hire a football coach pretty soon. You're going to be able to shape a department that needs a little bit of improvement in terms of not being sued and things like that. And then, Lisa Bluter is going, she's not going to go too much longer, I would not think. I mean, you never know. But, she's been doing this a really long time as well. Would not shock me if she's nearing the end. And like we mentioned, Fran, who knows about brands? He has unlimited energy or whatever. But it's a super attractive job is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think if the next Iowa AD lasts 17 years like Gary did, I think it's very reasonable that AD will need to hire a men's basketball coach, a football coach, and a women's basketball coach. So it is very important to make sure that this hire process is thorough and well suited for everybody involved. And on the Gets front, I do think it's noteworthy to leave a Division I AD job for essentially a number 2 position. Those jobs are hard to come by. There's not many Division I jobs, especially one, when you just look at the football side of things. So I think Iowa would be smart to test the water and see, just because this job hasn't been, really considered for change for so long, it would be interesting to see how many names out there that don't have any Iowa connections are interested. I just saw a tweet from Kyle Bowlesby on Twitter who basically said that a lot of sitting Power 5 ADs would be interested in coming to Iowa. So, it'll be an interesting balance of, hey, we have a great candidate here who knows the lay of the land and seems, right in position to make a seamless transition. But at the same time, if you get some, upper tier name that's interested, that maybe you didn't think would be until you threw the line out there and see who was interested, then it could be a tough call. So I really think that there will be a lot of fascinating elements to this hire, because it could either be really short and they just stay internally and go that route, and I think that would be that could very well be the best route to go, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that would be the case. Or it could be something that, takes a little longer and Iowa really, does a national search the way that you see it phrased when football coaches move on. So really interested to see what the search process looks like moving forward.
We know it's a holiday weekend, so we're going to, make this not, we don't need a 2-hour podcast here. So let's move to 3-word headlines, Dargan. And as it often happens, 3-word headlines direct us into other areas of conversation. So we love them for various reasons. My friend from the Athletics, Scott Dochterman, weighs in with the first one: win, graduate, do it right. Smashing those last bit together, obviously. But that was the 3-pronged mantra of Gary Barta. You do have to, I feel like you have to give him a nod in the academics department. He always made that a high priority within his coaching staff, within the department, and 8 straight years where the entire athletics department had at least a 3.0 GPA. Now, the black graduation rate that came up in 2018, 42%, lowest in the Big Ten, that it was not an example of win, graduate, do it right. So You know, I know Scott was just being a little bit funny there, but there's a lot to unpack even with that statement. You know, and did he do it right? Those kinds of things, right? You know, obviously there's a lot of positive ones here. Dargan, Patrick says, "Thank the Lord." Hawkeye Wrath says, "When graduates settle." We got a little. Is that Backstreet Boys or NSYNC? I can't remember. That does the bye 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 thing. I don't know who it is. It's one of those two, right? Yeah. There's a GIF of that. So from Phil Parker, America's National Treasure. Anything that jump out to you, Dargan?
Yeah, so obviously, as we said, I think 99.9% of them are negative. So if you're coming with a negative comment, I'm gonna need some creativity. You know, the whole "it's about time" or "take Brian with you" or all that. You know, we're gonna skip over those. But one that I did like from Elizabeth Wildenberg said Rob Sand won. Obviously, that was that was the big headliner coming out of that was Rob Sand saying that he was not going to vote for taxpayers to cover the settlement unless Gary Barta was fired. So kind of interesting there. One said from 3L4 Iowa, nepotism supervisor wanted. That one kind of explains itself. And then
I don't know why, but that struck me as well done. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's just a funny one. Good job.
Yeah, like I said, I gotta give if you're gonna come negative, then you gotta put some creativity to it. Let me see. There was another good one. Let's see. Come on. Oh, I gotta. This is from. Well, the Twitter header is Firebrine Ference, and at LF_ATX says Kirk's lapdog died. So another Kirk Ferentz reference, which certainly certainly will be interesting to see how that relationship comes together. And then another one that I think is will also be interesting is prioritize NIL, please. Obviously, there's been a lot of turbulence, it seems, between Gary Barta and the Swarm, and so it'll be interesting to see if that coming together of a new concept, you know, is one of the things that gets kind of a refresh moving forward.
I wanted to read one from my text group that I thought that was kind of funny. And I don't even know if it was meant to be a 3-word headline, but it was just a text I got. It said, Barta to USC. You know, the USC problematic athletic directors, you know, and they're coming to the Big Ten, folks. That's another little thing, you know, that, this new AD gets to, you know, enter this new territory of this new TV deal with a lot more money, you know, tens of millions of dollars coming into the budget. So he or she will, you know, comes in with a major opportunity. And again, to get back to kind of the idea of what kind of job this is, I mean, it is a pretty, I don't want to say a loyal fan. Well, it's definitely a loyal fan base, but somewhat forgiving fan. I mean, certainly you can keep a job a long time at the University of Iowa if you are even moderately successful. So Matt Purdy, I wanted to give him a little airtime here. He was a former Hawkeye lineman who really was outspoken when the swimming stuff happened. He throws out the headline, "Worst AD ever," was his 3-word headline. And then Hawkeyes off the hook. I think a lot of people feel like it's, you know, there's no more lawsuits coming. Maybe, you know, just kind of like a little bit of a fresh start, kind of where we began the conversation, Dargan. So with that, what other avenues would you like to explore? As I was talking, I just realized, Dargan, even just in the last 6 months, you had the rift with the Iowa Swarm Collective between Barta and and I believe that's still kind of happening. There was the rumored growing rift between Barta and Kirk Ferentz. And obviously, I'm sure it wasn't helped with the contract terms of Brian Ferentz. And then it's probably 0.001% his fault, but Iowa is now in a sports gambling, investigation, and it's just, as I kind of wrote in my column, it's just sort of like it just became like, what's going to happen next? You don't know what's around the corner. And so I think that's where a lot of the celebration tweets are kind of coming from, that it is a fresh start was just what was needed. But I do feel like, and I appreciate all the compliments I've gotten in my column, because I tried to make it really balanced and fair to Gary, and also critical. Accomplished a lot, huge budget increases, fundraising, endowment increases by about 2.5 times, or 1.5 times, I should say. So anyway, a lot of mixed bags there. Any other topics you want to touch on before we sign off? Because I know we both got more stuff to do.
I'll sign off with this. So since Kennington Smith left the Iowa beat, there's been a sports betting story break, and the AD has retired, which very well could finish as the 2 biggest Iowa athletic stories of the calendar year. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So.
Hey, and I saw Alabama had just a brutal baseball loss in the SEC tournament to Florida. So
yeah, so
on Kennington's watch.
Yeah, so send your. Well, I don't know. Some people might be happy that. Well, most people are happy today. So anyway, but from a reporter standpoint, I blame Kennington for all of this.
Yeah, and shout out to you. You're pulling double duty out there in Omaha. While we have a minute, Dargan, let's just talk a brief bit about Iowa baseball. Lay us out the situation for the weekend. Hawkeyes play at 9 a.m. Saturday. I know that, against either Indiana or Michigan. Just give us a nutshell recap of what's going on there and what fans should watch.
Yeah, so Indiana, Michigan, they are warming up out here in front of me. They're going to start at 2 p.m. The winner of that will need to beat Iowa twice tomorrow in order to advance to the championship game. So I will play the first game at 9 a.m. If they win, then they're done for the day and advance to the title game. If they lose, then they'll come back and play at, I believe, 5 p.m. Saturday night or Saturday evening. So expect Ty Langenberg to get the start Saturday morning. Iowa's probably, just going to try to close it out there and get to Sunday. Looking like Maryland is in the driver's seat on the other side of the bracket. So they won the league, and another series that Iowa probably felt like it could have won and should have won in Iowa City. So really intriguing bracket, really intriguing, now that there's no question about whether Iowa's going to get in a regional, it's kind of just fascinating to settle in and watch it for the baseball rather than, the movement elsewhere. So I know Rick Heller is happy to be in that situation. And obviously to kind of tie everything together, he will be very interested in who the new AD is, just because, the baseball scene, college baseball in general is so, it differs school to school very much so in terms of how big of a priority people make it. And a lot of that has to do with, where the AD stands on that. So I know he'll be happy, or will be interested to see how that goes, and is going to be happy to have the day off and kind of set everything up and hope to take care of business in the morning.
Thank you, Dargan, for everything. Boy, we've been through a lot together, with the women's basketball stuff, now the gambling in the last few months. So really appreciate you. And I know our listeners do too. Best case scenario, Iowa wins tomorrow, 9 a.m. Doesn't have to play again until, Sunday, where they get a high RPI opponent in Maryland, potentially. Otherwise, maybe Nebraska, which would be like packed stadium. So either way, pretty exciting if Iowa can make it. I don't know. Are you done, or any final words?
I'm good.
All right. Thanks, Hawkeye fans. Chad Leistikow, Dargan, Southard. Enjoy your holiday weekend. Talk